excited to have Mike here tonight. I've known Mike for a long time and been a big fan of Mike's work. And Mike is an associate teaching professor at the University of Washington Information School, which is where I got my master's as well. Teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in information architecture, taxonomy and ontology, and knowledge management. And then on top of that, he has more than 25 years of experience as a consultant in content management and strategy. So brings an enormous amount of experience and academic rigor to his work. And I'm excited to hear about the project that he's going to talk about.
Thanks, Paula. That pictures of my younger, more handsome brother. Not sure where we got that one, but thanks for allowing me to take some time out of your early evening tonight. I'm going to make this quick. I tend to speak a bit quickly. So again, pop questions in the chat, or you can just save them till the end. If I don't cover it, or if I missed something. So this is the first slide. Paula's going to help me or someone's going to help me by advancing the slide. So we go to the next slide. And this is what I'm going to talk about. I mean, this is the title of my presentation tonight. You can make up your own title, I guess is what I'm saying here, is that the goal of what I'm going to talk about is to give you some insight into a project that I'm finishing up as a consultant, but that was tied back to some research with some grad students I did in my classes at the University of Washington. And it really is about connecting brains to new ideas. And so the next slide, please. And as Paula said, this is me. I've been at teaching at the iSchool for, I think, for about 15 years. I've been consulting for going on 30 years. I've seen a lot in the content strategy space over that time as a consultant in the university. Next slide. And so I teach, again, as Paula was saying, next slide, please. I need a clicker. There we go. Teach IA, taxonomy, ontology. Rochelle was in 2 of my classes today, my IA class and my taxonomy class, talking about World IA Day. I think it's important. That's a beautiful building. If you ever get a chance to go into that building on the university campus, it's amazing. And I'm sure there's some folks here from the iSchool. And the last one there is what I teach. I'm teaching this course. I teach it as a grad level of knowledge management. And that's what I'm going to focus on tonight. Next slide. So I like to define my terms before I start talking in case anybody's uncertain what that means. I know that I don't like that feeling of not knowing what someone's talking about. So here are some terminology definitions, KM and VM. You kind of probably already know. Search, of course, you sort of know. It's the last 2 that I really want to focus on tonight because that's from the knowledge management world. And this is specifically what I am working with the client on. We've already set this up. I'm going to show you examples of that. But real quickly, in KM, the KM discipline, this whole idea of tacit versus explicit knowledge is critical. And tacit knowledge basically is everything that we know and think of and do on our jobs and sports or whatever it happens to be. But it's not necessarily codified. It's not necessarily written down in some document and so others can read it or view it or whatever it happens to be. We all have tacit knowledge in our brains. And as we get older, of course, the assumption is that you're accumulating more and more tacit knowledge. And the challenge is for a lot of companies today is that you've got a lot of older workers, boomers like myself, who are getting ready to retire or have retired or are close to it. And they have a lot of tacit knowledge in their head. And oftentimes that's really technical knowledge that is hard to transmit. I mean, in the olden days, quote unquote, you had this relationship between a master and apprentice, and you spend 10,000 hours, 5 years, whatever it is, learning a craft like making horseshoes or tanning leather or something. And that was a very intimate relationship between someone sharing their tacit knowledge and then in essence making it explicit. In digital world, much harder to do. People don't last at jobs that long. They tend to move around a lot. And so the ability or the desire for a lot of companies is to get this tacit knowledge out of older workers' heads and younger workers too, and turn it into some form of explicit knowledge that can be used by others. especially those that are being hired onto companies now that don't have a lot of experience, and especially in areas that are highly technical. Next, please. So in a nutshell, I was hired to provide an assessment of this company's overall KM situation as it exists today, which was non-existent, and then provide some recommendations on how they can start to develop a KM framework and a strategy for doing pretty much what I just said. They were this company, the people that work there are very self-aware. They're very intelligent. Most of if not all the people that work there are master's degrees, PhDs, and above. They just have an enormous amount of academic and practical experience. They're very intelligent. They were wise enough to realize that they have a problem. And in order to grow, they're a very small company. In order to grow, they can't afford their highest paid, most long tenured employees sitting down with new employees every other day or once a week and telling them everything that they know. It just is not feasible. It doesn't scale. And so I was brought in to help them understand how to set up a KM management, strategy and framework, not necessarily a knowledge management system, software system, but the framework for how to go about doing this. Next. So what's the big idea? So what's it going to take? And so what I came up with and what I've been working on with some grad students for the past couple of years was that extracting tacit knowledge from individuals and small groups somehow, and then turn that tacit knowledge explicit in some sort of a standardized format in which there's a repeatability, there's some templates and some processes left behind that the knowledge worker, knowledge manager that they've hired now, who is just a recent PhD graduate from the UW in bioengineering. This person is now their knowledge manager, obviously very intelligent, doesn't necessarily have experience in this space, but has caught on quickly and has turned this into like an ongoing practice now within the last 3 months that we've been working on this. There we go. There we go. And the idea is to get the knowledge out of the heads of the workers that are very experienced with the company, that founded the company, and then get that into a way in which younger workers who are being hired now a lot can consume it. So next. Well, you can't do anything without asking ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT, of course, came back with an answer. Nothing past 2021, I guess. But so, yes, I mean, everybody kind of knows what's going on here, though it's not necessarily implemented a lot yet. So let's go to the next one. And there we go. So what we did. So the end result, in case you want to leave early, you can hear you can see the conclusion. The company now has a framework for an in-depth, KM program that they're starting to build with this new employee that they hired. And also, as at this point, employees no longer have to do what they used to do, which was look for information in folders, on Z drives or whatever drives or cloud drives, or email it or tap someone on the shoulder to learn more, to find this information. They're now starting to, and we're just getting this underway, now starting to be able to use a systematic approach to finding information that they need that they might have been able to find it on Google, but really what we're after here is we're dealing with a company that has a lot of proprietary information, so that's not going to be on Google. And it's highly technical and very detailed, and that also is probably not going to be generally available on Google. So the idea is that we're building this sort of really intense knowledge management system inside the company so that they can, as employees, can go in and just start learning from day one. We've got an enterprise search system that's probably going to be installed shortly, and that's Elasticsearch that we're looking at. And the experienced employees that we've been dealing with the whole time are now, after 24 or more interviews, and there's probably going to be 60, 70, 80 in the next couple of months, are sharing their knowledge in this sort of recognizable and repeatable way rather than just this off the cuff over a cup of coffee in the break room. The content creation processes are being standardized across other systems that create content so that the metadata that are being generated inside of the managed vocabulary that we've set up can be used rather than just random people adding random metadata here or there, and then we're optimizing those systems to be their best for optimizing for search systems to go index. So those are the successes, and that's where we're at right now. I'm rolling off the project at the end of this month, and then I've got full confidence the person who I've been training, so to speak, can take it and run with it. He's got a lot of great ideas. So let's talk a bit more and get into a bit more detail. The summary. So to recap, this is a small company. They're growing. They need this KM system. There's a lot of new hires, and they need to be able to find this information a lot easier than they have been. The new hires tend to be frustrated because they get hired and then are thrown into the mix and don't really understand what's going on and have no other way than this sort of email, again, tap on the shoulder to find out. They currently use folder storage and email as their main knowledge management system. There's no enterprise search. There's no vocabulary management. They do not have it. Well, they did not have a taxonomy. And you can see here that most of the employees are very, very experienced, and some of them 20, 25 years in the field. And that's a ton of knowledge that you just simply can't, you can't get in necessarily in a white paper. I mean, one of the founders is writing a book on the topic, but reading a book, come on. The employees have to have a better way to get to this information faster. There's no HR onboarding. I mean, and I'm not putting the company down. I'm just telling you what I met up with. And they've got more than 25 different software systems that they use. And you can see with all those different types of software systems, some of which are very technical, and some of which are as simple as SharePoint, laugh. That there's just no standardized way to get this information. And the founders and the C-levels right now sense with more and more investments from different sources that they have a lot of IP that is going to get lost, and that could spell the downfall of this company because they're not big enough to absorb a huge loss of personnel and or of projects. So next, please. So what we did, of course, we developed a core set of information personas, not user personas, just strictly information personas. We didn't have time to go deep into user backgrounds. We created 4 or 5 of these to justify how we were going to present and build the system. And we had to have some justification. And they were simple information personas. There's nothing complex. We had to get them done in a couple of weeks. But they provided a basis, the groundwork for what we're going to do. We built an initial taxonomy that's right now somewhere around the 700, 800 term range. It's pretty small, but it's within the company's domain. And the person I'm training had no idea how to do this, but with a bio background, you can have figured it out pretty easily, Linnaean and everything. So he's caught up on that. And then we started to do Zoom interviews. And this is kind of the crux of the whole message, is that we started to do these Zoom interviews because we needed to capture that tacit knowledge out of these experienced and newbie workers' heads as well. And then we had to cleanse the transcripts, and I'm going to show you samples in a second. Inside of a standardized template, we're advising the purchase and use of Pool Party as a vocabulary management tool and Elasticsearch as a search system. Everybody has their own opinions on this. I totally understand it, but that's what we came forward with, and that's what they're looking into right now. They're investigating that. We also advise them that they need to start creating a document creation process of managing content more carefully, which they tend to just put things in silos now and leave them, and then until somebody eventually knows where they are. And then we're advising them to investigate how the current software systems that they use might be able to use metadata. And that metadata, though, has to come from a standardized vocabulary, which, of course, we're working on. And all of these things sort of tie together. I mean, the search system is the end result. The vocabulary management tool, the Pool Party, is a middleware that sits in between the content creation repositories and then the search system. So this is sort of the overall KM knowledge management framework that we're setting up. Now I want to go one step deeper into the next slide, which talks a bit more about detail. The personas were lightweight, like I said, and we just wanted to get them so that they had no idea what a persona was. So we gave them a sample, a taste of what that is, and they go, oh, okay, that pretty much, that's a high level view of what we got. It's this templatizing the Zoom transcripts that we really spent some time on, and I'll show you a sample of that in a second. The interviews, I did not do the interviews because there's a lot of proprietary information, which even under NDA, I was not allowed to listen to or access. A lot of it is related to the defense industry and other things, and totally understand it, didn't need to be there. Set the person up to be a great interviewer. He learned over time. We started with experienced employees, talk about job responsibilities and past projects and sunset reviews and things like that. And then we got into, or now are getting into, very specific technical topics in these interviews, and then also internal company processes in these interviews. So these are being done now on a consistent basis, and the employees are going to get interviewed, especially the older, more knowledgeable employees will get interviewed a lot, probably 3 or 4 or 5 times. Younger employees, maybe not so much, just maybe some ideas about what they're bringing in. And then we got to get this taxonomy vocabulary management tool so that they can start controlling their terminology and being able to use the terminology correctly, especially for newbies coming in who might not understand all the technical terms that are being used. They'll have access to a web interface version of the taxonomy for vocabulary reasons. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we started simple. I mean, we templatized, that's not their logo, by the way. We templatized the questions and we kind of, we based on the personas, and then we kind of, came up with this sort of lightweight, here's what they do and here's what they're about. Here's the content they create, the content they consume, what they need and what they desire, and things like that. And then we came up with a standardized, templatized version for asking questions. This is the first one. We probably, I think, have 4 or 5 of these now for different reasons. Like I said earlier, project reviews, topic analysis, kind of things like that. But the idea is that the knowledge manager now has a templatized version and a way to just quickly swap in and out content before going and doing the interviews. They send them to the interviewee in advance, so everybody sort of knows what's coming. There's no surprises. But this then turns out to be a way that people in the company start to get used to seeing, oh, that's one of the questionnaires for the Zoom interviews. That's great. And it just adds more and more to the establishment of standardized processes that everybody sort of gets used to and recognizes right off the bat. The next slide is a bit discouraging, but this is what we've been working with. This is a VTT file, or so it's a video text track file that comes out of Zoom, and you enable Zoom to produce these, and it's rough, right? And there's a lot of extraneous information in here, and it's kind of choppy. Everybody who goes into the Zoom session puts their full name into the Zoom, when they're in the interview, so that it comes out with their name on it. But you can kind of see it's broken, and there's effort that has to go into cleansing this once we get it done. However, we came up with some processes for how to do this in Microsoft Word. You use grammar checker, spelling checker. You throw it into Excel, get rid of all the extraneous information like these numerals and these timestamps. And then you put that into a final format, which looks like this. Yeah, there it is. And that's the result. So this is what the final format looks like for these interviews. So you've got, of course, the name of the person, the date of the interview, the interviewer, the topic that was being discussed. I'll talk about that video link in a second. And then some keywords. And the keywords, of course, come straight out of the vocabulary management, the control vocabulary, the taxonomy that's been set up, so that when the systems like the search system or the vocabulary management tool start indexing this content, they're going to start seeing these keywords pop up that are matched back to the taxonomy for, and then, of course, if you've done any work in taxonomy ontology work, you know that you can extend keywords through ontological relationships, blah, blah, blah. That's for later. They're not even close to that yet, but that can be done. Then the interviewer writes a little summary, and then here's the cleaned up transcript. And so what the interviewer does is goes in, and typically right after the interview or shortly thereafter, so they can remember what they were talking about. And some of these blocks of texts are huge because the person just keeps talking, which is great. But they end up, they're rich, they're full of great content. They've got what, all of these deep technical thoughts about what the company has done on projects and topics and things. But what we're working on right now is, right before I leave, is that we're going to start highlighting keywords or phrases from the interview, and then hyperlink those back to markers inside the video, so that if somebody is reading this text because it comes up on a search result, they can just click on a link and jump over to where the interviewee was talking about that specific topic in the interview, rather than having to watch the whole interview, which no one's going to do, or read all this text, which most people aren't going to do. And that's the link back to the video. So the Zoom interview, of course, is, created and saved as a video. But the key is that we're matching keywords, and we're selecting. And yeah, it's true. We're hand selecting topics here that can then be hyperlinked back to time markers inside the video. I think it's like jumps 10 seconds before, then it starts playing, whether it's on YouTube or SharePoint video, whatever it happens to be. But the idea is that we're allowing these newbies to come in, and if they have a topic that they need to search on, a very specific technical topic that the company does, they could put that into the search engine. This document can pop up, or something similar can pop up on a left rail where you faceted out the results, and then they can click on that and jump straight to the video and have that that expert explain what they do and how they did it and what this is about to them directly, rather than having to go ask. And the company sees that as a massive time saver. They also are starting to appreciate, because we've also taken some chapters from some books that they have written or are writing. We've ingested those into the vocabulary management tool for text analysis, and a lot of keywords are popping up out of that. So the point is that the company realizes that they've got so much more valuable IP now out of these interviews that they never even knew, of course, because no one knows everything until they get it onto paper, so to speak. But we're shortcutting all of that and get rid of all that extraneous, go ask, so-and-so, because I think they did something 3 years ago. And we're going straight to the heart of it and getting that information out of someone's head and putting it on paper. So we go next. And so this is part two, what we added, the search system. You got to integrate it with my vocabulary management systems to sort of start taking advantage of keywords. And then, of course, if you're into taxonomy and ontology, you know about SCOS relationships and related terms and things like that. The search system that they're thinking about getting, which is Elasticsearch, does a lot more than just search. And that's what they also want to do. They want to get into the analytics of search and who's searching and what's been downloaded, but also a lot of other things having to do with their content. And we think that Elasticsearch could probably do that. They've modified their content publishing processes to be more optimized for not only just adding metadata, if possible, to the work that they're doing in these sort of esoteric technical software systems, but also just to, in general, they understand more about how to add any kind of metadata or tags to content as it's being processed and published in a system. And that includes the last thing, where we're just trying to say, use these software systems smarter. And they've never even thought of that. They've just been producing content because, that's what they do. But now they're thinking about, how can we make this piece of technical content smarter? Perhaps if we can't use it, this other stuff, we could at least use some terms and tags from our metadata system, so that when it goes into search analyzes it, there'll be more consistent results. Next slide. And that's it. Key takeaways. Number one thing was to get this knowledge out of people's heads and get it into a codified format that can be used and reused in a number of different ways. They probably haven't even thought of them yet. I certainly haven't thought of them yet, but they were just bulging, no pun intended, and their heads were bulging with all this knowledge, and they did not want that walking out the door. And so they had to get it into some format, and that's what they're doing right now. And this standardizing of format of creating, storing, and using content is what they needed. That's what is now starting to be provided. When you start to say more accurate and relevant search, they didn't even have search. And then once we get search installed, of course, everybody knows how to use Google, but this is going to be an internal domain search where you're just searching on information that the company owns, proprietary, very secured, highly confidential. And so it's a different kind of search than just searching on Google. This is going to be a tightly focused search within a small domain of highly technical, like I've been saying, highly technical, detailed, and confidential, and I don't know what that other word is, super top secret stuff. and it's scalable. You know, the idea is that I set this up so that as the company grows, this can just scale out. I just set up the framework and just set, you know, some targets for them to hit, but the rest of it's not up to me. It's going to be up to the people that work there. So that's kind of it. I mean, that's sort of what I did. That's the case study. That's, you know, the successes were there. We didn't struggle all that much, but, you know, it's not easy. This is not easy work to do, but it's going to pay off, and I think for them in the long run. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Mike. That took me back. I really enjoyed my high school classes in grad school. So yeah, it was really nice to kind of revisit some of that information. We do have a couple of questions for you. If you're ready, I'll go ahead and shoot with the first one. So one of our folks had the question that they had never heard the term information persona. They were curious about how that differed from what we commonly think of as a persona.
Yeah, so information personas are things that I'm teaching my students in my information architecture class. They're not nowhere near as deeply researched as a user persona. They strictly revolve around a high-level identification of a type of user, and then more specifically and more importantly for our concerns is what kind of information are they seeking? What kind of information don't they have? What kind of information are they creating? So the focus is really on the information needs and processes, I guess you could say, of a person rather than deeper UX user research background. These are not that, and they're not meant to be.
Okay, that is really helpful. Tess, did you have any other questions related to that?
No, that is a great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. All right. Franklin wanted to know, he feels like the synchronizing video, the transcript search into a single tool to make a new employee onboarding is a really cool thing. Is there a recommended tool or set of tools to accomplish this? I know you mentioned a couple of them in there, but I'm curious if there was other tools that were involved.
Yeah, you know, there are what are called knowledge management system softwares out there, but I've talked to a lot of people over the past 15 years about them because we've been trying to solve this problem for over 20 years. The KM tools, yeah, I mean, they're okay. But honestly, it's a tricky balance because most companies don't want to buy yet another software system. They're just like, we got enough. I mean, what else do we need? And so I intentionally kept it at the level of Microsoft Office, you know, Word and Excel and then Zoom, because everybody knows what those things are. The only thing that I was adding was, you know, the vocabulary management tool, like a Smart Logic or a Pool Party or a Top Quadrant or something like that, which are, you know, kind of pretty sophisticated taxonomy tools to use. I'm also recommending some, I guess you could say, you know, lower level, more moderately priced options that don't really do as much. And then, you know, a search system, you know, you could have gone Google, you could have gone Elasticsearch, you could have gone any of those search systems. So those, again, are pretty basic stuff. There's nothing exotic about this. My goal was to not have to keep adding on more software systems. They had enough software. They needed a framework and some processes, more on the human side rather than on the technical side. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. It totally relates to the question that I sort of posed in relation to that, which is, if you did have them buy a certain set of tools, how did you sell them on the value of those when a lot of companies are like, I don't want another software tool? Right.
Yes. So I told them all along that the framework I was setting up could be used inside of SharePoint. SharePoint has some taxonomy capabilities, and if you're groaning right now, you're probably a taxonomist. But it can be done, right? And I told them that. I said, you could do this in SharePoint. You could put a plugin into Confluence and do this in Atlassian Confluence. You could do it in Confluence, you know, and I said, my goal is to not stress you out on thinking about the technology, because that's not what it's about. What it's about is getting that knowledge into some format that can be used and searched upon. So I told them all along, look, I'm going to give you everything you need to go make your own decisions. I've made recommendations, but I'm not running in there with, oh my gosh, you've got to get this piece of technology, otherwise this will never work. Because in my opinion, that's not true. I mean, this will work, and that's why I set up as a framework, because even with the technologies, which are pretty crude that they've got, I'm not saying SharePoint is crude or Confluence is crude, but I'm saying the way they use them might be considered crude. I didn't want to upset them with yet even more. So I gave them the option, and surprisingly, they ended up sort of like wanting the vocabulary management and the Elasticsearch to the search tools, rather than saying we can't afford or don't want any more tools. Their biggest concern with regard to tools was not necessarily the financing, but the security. So it's a big, I mean, they have to be. They're hyper aware of security, and that's why they are tending towards not using cloud versions, but we're discussing that now.
Great, thank you. Did you, I can't remember, and I could have just missed it. Did you mention what you use to transcribe the videos and get them cleaned up?
Word. Yeah.
Word in your brain.
We just use those VTT files. Again, are kind of trashy. You have to spend a little time cleaning them up. But what we found is once you kind of got into it, it didn't take that long. And once you're really doing it as part of your job, it's pretty quick. So it's a Zoom text transcript file popped into Word, cleaned up, and saved out in that template that I showed you.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, that does sound like a little bit of labor, but sounds like a very worthwhile labor.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, the next question. Shannon says, was there any coaching done to help interviewees understand how to get to the point and be direct, so it would be easy to be consumed by others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's what the purpose of was that first round of interviews, which again, couldn't be a part of the interviews, but for security reasons, but it was just that sort of high level, tell us about your information needs, without becoming Marcia Bates or anything. How do you berry pick and things like this? So it was like, well, that was a warm up, and that helped the employees sort of warm up to this whole idea. And that helped the interviewer sort of warm up to how to ask questions, because he had no formal training in interviewing or anything like that, or research. Well, I mean, his PhD, so he did research, but not interviewing in this vein. So that was the warm up, and that was a bit rocky at first, as expected. But then he started to catch on, like, oh, if I ask this question in this order and maybe make it closed-ended or open-ended, I'll get more information out of these folks. And then it started to pick up a rhythm, and then he just took off with it. And after 10 or 15, 20 interviews, he's really good at it right now. But it just took a little bit at first.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the art of interviewing is definitely something that comes with a little practice and getting the information back. Let's see, Laura wanted to know, is the institutional knowledge walking out the door problem something that a lot of companies are investigating right now?
Yeah, for the last 25 years, that's been a massive concern from the biggest to the smallest companies. And I've worked on KM projects before in the past, and they all got kind of bogged down in, IT was running them. So therefore, every solution is technical, in nature, and it's not human focused. So don't worry about all that stuff. People don't matter. Let's just buy some technology to do it. All of them failed. And so this time I was determined I was not going to take the gig unless they agree that this is not a technical problem. This is a people process problem. Mm-hmm. And they did. They said, yeah, we agree. This is not technical. And so for years and years and years, KM knowledge management software systems have tried to solve this problem with people, knowledge walking out the door. And it ended up being too proprietary to the KM system itself, rather than sort of, omnipotent across all of the other software systems. And the challenge is, I worked on a project like this for NASA at Johnson Space Center a long time ago, and they were doing brown bag lunches and video interviewing all these engineers that worked on Apollo. And I was there for a number of those interviews, because all these folks were leaving NASA, and they had nowhere to put all the records that they worked on Apollo, Gemini and Apollo missions. So these engineers were retired, just taking all that information home and putting it in their garage. And if you've ever been to Houston in the summer, you know what I'm talking about. That's not the best place to store records. And so the videos took too long. Nobody would watch them. No one really knew how to fast forward to get to the good bits, you know? So the technology to do what we're doing now, it wasn't around until, I don't know, until just recently, you know, with Zoom and video capabilities being what they are and things like that. The time is now to start doing this, I think.
Yeah. I would definitely love to do that in my organization for sure, because I onboarded about a year ago and had that experience of having to do a lot of shoulder tapping to get the information out.
Yeah.
There was a question from, let's see. Oh, where did it go? Oh, yeah, it was a question about the title knowledge manager. Did you say that there was a person whose title is knowledge manager, and what would a job description for that sound like, just in brief?
Yeah, go to LinkedIn. There's knowledge manager jobs there. There's oftentimes it's not called that; it's called something else. But the job description is doing kind of what we're doing here. You know, gathering, indexing, you know, quantifying, qualifying content, making it more available to everybody in the company. But you know, that it goes beyond sort of like a content manager who's doing more of the day-to-day managing of content on websites and such. And a knowledge manager oftentimes is more into archiving and goes to the archives and gets information that's been, you know, stored away or just siloed off, and starts reintegrating that back into the company culture. Because as most companies will tell you, that, you know, people create things and then someone else creates the exact same thing, and then they're wasting a ton of time doing it. So a knowledge manager is more, you know, sort of maybe part archivist, part, you know, interviewer, part technologist, you know, part search SEO person kind of thing. It's kind of a mixed bag of talent. But this person, again, like I said, the person that they hired has a PhD in bioengineering, but you know, smart people can do it, and he's doing a great job. He's learning, but he's doing a great job.
Nice. That sounds like a cool job, actually.
Yeah.
Very wide ranging, but very, very cool.
Yep.
Let's see. Trisha, maybe you'll understand this question, Mike. In your tiered system analysis, are you storing information on a flat linear layout, or are you putting it in a 3D storage system connected through a 4D linear connection points?
Yeah, too much information. I can't answer that question. What I can say is that once the person at the company starts to understand the value of taxonomy, and he's going to build up to more ontology, the eventual goal is that a lot of this is going to get built into a knowledge graph and into a graph database, so that relationships between terms can be more fruitful in search, and then that's would be their next step. One of the challenges I've always faced is that we come in, companies really have no idea what we're talking about. Even today, I mean, it's better than it was, say, I don't know, 20 years ago when people thought it was stuff and dead animals. It's better today, but it's still like they're going, I don't know, you know, $100,000 for a piece of software to do vocabulary management seems like a lot. And then I'm like, well, you know, here's all the advantages of doing that. And it's just an ongoing process to take. And that question was far more complex than I would know, to take complex ideas like that and not dumb them down, but simplify them enough to where people who aren't in the field can understand it. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Got it. Let's see. Madonna Lisa was curious, besides Zoom, did they have chat systems or boards where you could also extract additional knowledge management bits?
Yeah, potentially we thought about that, and they don't use anything like that. I mean, you know, like a Slack channel or chat or maybe something in, you know, Confluence. We're talking about that. They stopped using Confluence because it just got too out of control. that they just had no way to go find things. And they're like, no one's going to read these long, posts inside of Confluence. And I'm like, well, what kind of metadata are you adding to it? And they're like, what? What are you talking about? That's crazy language. And I'm
Yeah.
like, all right. So, but they didn't understand that, of course, having a controlled vocabulary, step one, and then move on from that to more advanced steps, and then pick up the systems along the way where you can, harvest that kind of information from. Chat tends to be casual and short sentences, and that's why we went for the longer format interview inside of Zoom, where you're getting like full, complete sentences or paragraphs of thought. And the reason is because, again, this stuff is so complex that they're dealing with. A chat session doesn't necessarily get to what they're after, which is that deep understanding of complex issues. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Lily wanted to know, her question was, folks have been reticent about sharing knowledge for a long time.
Yep.
For fear of being replaceable.
Right.
As LLMs like ChatGPT evolve, I'm feeling a lot of concern about dumping my brain. Any thoughts? I'm sure I'm not the only one wondering about this.
Everybody's thought that for the last, again, since I've been involved in knowledge management projects for 25, 30 years. And the reality is that, and this is one of the first companies I've seen do this, where they're like, no, you don't understand, is that the more the employees become more valuable to us when they first do this dump, so to speak. It sounds horrible, I know, sorry. Do this knowledge dump, and because they then are prompted to go even deeper by, one, listening to younger employees who are coming out of universities with all these great ideas, and two, they start to, it increases their self-worth. Now, it's a small company, I understand that, and there's always the option of, we're gonna drain your brain and then we're gonna fire you. But what this company is smart enough to realize is that no, it's the opposite. The more we drain your brain, the more we realize how valuable you are, and we want you to do even more before you leave. And so it ends up actually causing them more work than less, which is a bit of a paradox. But at the same time, you're like, well, I could see that, because instead of hoarding, you're really sharing. And in some cases, some of the interviews I've heard about, because I can't read them, they're oversharing, so to speak, because they're into, and they start to see, the older employees especially start to see the value of getting rid of all this knowledge that they've got, because that then allows them to do more work. So it ends up being the opposite of what we all thought and feared of, well, you're going to replace my job. And of course, the company's like, well, can we put all this into an AI system? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, eventually, but first figure out what you need to do, and then start talking about how you can enhance that. And yeah, they're coming around. Although we did start this project before ChatGPT, and so now that pops up a lot in conversations with them, and they have to kind of temper that a little bit with reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
So, and you may have already answered this, and if you did, forgive me, maybe you could just talk a little bit more about it. But, thinking about, these companies that have this situation where there's so much information locked up in people's brains, developing what you're developing sort of helps solve that problem and get it out of, get that knowledge captured. But how do you stop that as kind of an organizational culture or whatever to begin with, that now, once you've kind of captured that, as you go forward, how do you keep from getting to the place where you have to periodically do this, or you have to, is this an exit interview every time someone leaves the company, or are new employees trained to do a better job of kind of interacting with the knowledge that's been captured and contributing to it?
Yeah, so one of the things I advised them on was you need to flip that whole thinking about capture everything you can during an exit interview, because that's a waste of time. What you need to do, and what we're setting up the process for, is that new employees are interviewed when they first get on board, and they then sort of learn the culture of sharing. because they're basically having their brain trained of great new ideas that no one's thought of yet or hasn't brought into the company. And then this continues. The process that I'm recommending is that this continues with employees over their tenure with the company, so that by the time they get to an exit, they want to leave the company, there's nothing left or very little left that they haven't already shared. And so you have to reverse that funnel from, trying to squeeze as much as you can before someone leaves, because there's not a whole heck of a lot of motivation to share all my knowledge with you if I'm leaving tomorrow. You have to capture that from the other way. So you turn the funnel around, you capture a lot from the very beginning, and the exit interview just becomes, thanks, see you later. So that you don't have that pressure to get as much as you can, because there's a lot of politics involved in knowledge sharing if you've got bad feelings about a company or you're going to another company.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, I put a little effort into my last exit interview, but the person interviewing me told me that was not the norm.
Right.
Yeah. Franklin asks, what is the current state of using ChatGPT with interview style Q&A for knowledge searching in the industry? Do we know?
Oh, boy, I don't know about that. I mean, I do not know how ChatGPT is set up and what it uses. I do know that it indexes a whole lot of content from all over the world. To me, and the reason that this project is so valuable is because the content, the domain is so limited. The content set is limited. The employee set is limited. And so once, Microsoft or Google has turned, an AI system like ChatGPT, made it available for internal use, like inside of a company, would be brilliant. I can't answer that. I mean, I have no idea how that would work. I do know that there's this concept called semantic AI, in which the AI systems are enhanced by a semantic system already being set up, like, the knowledge management system, like a vocabulary management system, like a pool party. I don't want to keep saying the brand because I don't work for them. I don't make any money off selling them stuff, but, like that, which can be connected, through SCOS and through more ontological relationships, and RDF can be used by an AI system to be smarter from the get-go. When that day arrives, that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
When? Don't know.
Yes, if you could predict the future, there would be a whole different job.
In November, not many folks knew about ChatGPT outside of ChatGPT.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's definitely taken over the internet now. Well, that was it that I had for questions in the chat. If anybody else wants to ask something, now is your opportunity. Otherwise, we can go ahead and wrap up. I'll pass it back to Paula.
Yeah, any other questions? If not, let's all thank Mike for his time, and thank you all for joining us, and hope to see you at any of our future events. So I've put back up for an annoyingly long time our slide with all of our links. Love to see you on Slack and have you visit our site. And when the video of this event is ready, we'll get that posted to YouTube, and Mike is generously sharing his slides. So we'll get all those resources posted on our website and in Slack. So keep an eye out there. And other than that, have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks. One more quick question, Paula. Somebody wanted to know when your second edition's coming out.
Oh God. Soon.
Soon.
Yes, it is in final copy edit, and hopefully sometime in the next few weeks, months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. TBD.
Yeah, soon. I hope it's nearly wrapped up.
Nice.
You all will be the first to know.
Well, thanks again, Mike. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.